you're almost going to battle with somebody. You get a different level of friendship with them. And there's just the stuff that you help each other through and the stuff you talk about is sort of a special thing.
If you can get through life doing things that is a net good, I think that's worth something.
These guys are unique, and the challenges that they've faced over these 4 lakes, each one of them is different. Who they are and what they do this for makes it all the more valuable.
What a crazy adventure this one was. Just this whole thing. Like so many times in the middle of the lake, it's like, how did we get here? We're here again. It's like we're back.
Centuries ago, the Erie people called these waters the Long Tail. It's a tribal name shortened from the Iroquoian word Irielhonan. Bordered by 4 states and 2 countries, it's drinking water to millions. But it's also one of the most polluted Great Lakes. Mostly because of us. Think of it as a death by 1,000 cut scenario. Raw sewage and industrial waste caused the Cuyahoga River, that spills into Lake Erie, to actually catch fire in 1969. And though there's been huge strides in the raw sewage and industrial waste being dumped into Erie, the invasion of zebra mussels and agricultural runoff are still a huge problem.
So the algal blooms tend to form every summer, and we've got sort of a perfect storm of events in Lake Erie. It's a shallow lake that warms up quite a bit. In addition, we're in a watershed that has lots of farming, and so when we get rains, the nutrients from those farms wash into the lakes. You take nutrients and warm water, and that's what algae love. And so they grow, but they grow way too much. And unfortunately, it's particular types of algae that grow that produce a toxin, a neurotoxin, that can be toxic to people.
Meet some of the people of CIGLR, or the Cooperative Institute for Great Lakes Research. Think of them as the first line of defense in Lake Erie.
CIGLR is a research institute that is hosted at the University of Michigan, but we partner with government agencies, non-governmental agencies, as well as universities and private businesses that span all 5 of the Great Lakes on both sides of the border. And our goal is to do research together that protects people, keeps them healthy, keeps them happy, and keeps us prosperous.
What you're seeing is part of the battle on Erie. CIGLR is constantly monitoring the lake for these harmful algal blooms. It starts with satellites and airplanes flying over to capture images of the blooms. Then these buoys are put to work.
What the buoys do is measure the nutrients, and they provide a ground truth so that those satellite and remote sensing measurements that cover the whole lake can be calibrated.
Algae, turbidity, conductivity and temperature, dissolved oxygen.
And some of the products from that are forecasts of where these harmful algal blooms will grow. And so those go to the water intake managers, they could go to public officials that indicate beach closures, that sort of thing, health departments, that kind of thing.
A few years ago, the city of Toledo had to shut down their water processing plant because of a bad bloom. That's why they try to attack the problem with as much science as possible. Check out this AUV from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute out of California. It isn't tied down like a buoy. It can travel the lake at the depth they set, and then can stay underwater for up to 3 weeks.
And it's able to take in water samples and also do processing on board. And so you get 60 water samples that you can take and process, and the vehicle is actually capable, in a rough sense, of determining the level of toxicity in the water, and it can radio home results.
Even when the summer's over, the algae is still a huge problem.
And importantly, when all that algae dies at the end of the summer, it sinks to the bottom, it sucks up all the oxygen, and that's when we get things like fish kills. So it's a real environmental problem, and we need to treat Lake Erie a little bit better.
I'd say we go another half mile.
That's where these 3 guys come in. Quinn Morris, Jeff Guy, and Joe Lorenz from Stand Up for Great Lakes were at it again, raising money and awareness for the issues that plague the Great Lakes by stand-up paddleboarding across them. They've already done Lakes Michigan, Huron, and Superior, And this year, it's Lake Erie. And the nonprofit they're standing up for is the Cooperative Institute for Great Lakes Research and the vital work they do.
The reason we're doing these paddles is to try to make people aware of what a great, amazing resource we have in the Great Lakes. And by doing these paddles, we want to show people what it's like to be out in the middle of them. And we also want to show them some of the problems. And our hope is we can make a difference.
Spreading that word is something CIGLR welcomed with open arms.
We were thrilled. We were mostly thrilled that we could bring some public awareness to Lake Erie and some of the environmental problems that we face in Lake Erie. It's a spectacular resource. If you've ever had the chance to drive around the shores of Lake Erie, absolutely beautiful lake, but we mistreat her sometimes, and we just thought this was a really positive way for us to bring some attention to how valuable this lake is for us.
This crossing, very different than Michigan Huron or Superior. Their fourth paddle across the fourth biggest Great Lake, and Erie wasn't going to make it easy on the guys. The long tail challenged them in ways they haven't been challenged before, but it also provided beauty that no one on that trip will ever forget. Usually these paddles start on a remote beach with barely anyone around. Not this one. Downtown Detroit, June 18th, 2019. They headed to their launch site on Belle Isle.
Nothing remote about starting a paddle in proximity to a metropolitan area populated by two countries. It was definitely a unique opportunity to start right in between two fantastic guardians of the water, in my opinion, the United States and Canada, who both have a vested interest in the Great Lakes, and here we were to start this cool adventure across Lake Erie.
Morning.
Good morning.
Belle Isle proved to be the first challenge, as the guys arrived to a media circus of sorts. There were 5 television stations waiting for them.
The second we got out of our trucks, there was a bunch of media there, a bunch of people. Everybody wanted a piece.
I mean, that's the whole point, right? We do something crazy to raise awareness and attention. So, you know, us dealing with the media at the beginning is the most important thing, to spread our word across the country, across the world, and raise funds for an organization working hard.
With all the interviews over, the river was waiting.
Let's do it.
This route was unlike anything they've ever done. Detroit, Michigan to Catawba Island, Ohio. There'd be around 25 miles of the Detroit River, then around 40 miles of open water on Lake Erie.
Woohoo, finally, guys.
Down the river towards the Detroit skyline. Sporting some pretty special jerseys.
The beginning of the paddle is my favorite because you feel good, you got all this excitement. The water's glassy, everyone's spirits are so high, and you're seeing the skyline coming. Never paddled there before.
It's a pretty unique spot because you've got a city, you know, that you grew up with on the one side, and then a whole other country on the other side, literally. And you're paddling right down the middle. All right, we just started. We got Iserman, Draper, my man. We got a drone. We got the Rensan. So far, shaping up for a great paddle.
It was slow moving in the beginning due to all the distractions. The beautiful scenery, people from shore cheering them on, and just taking in the moment. Then it was time to say goodbye to an old friend.
Ready? 3, 2, 1. Woohoo!
They're tearing it down, and I had a lot of fond memories of the Joe, and used to go to probably 2 or 3 games every year.
And we're going by it, and the cranes are in the process of knocking it down. It just meant a lot to us to kind of give it one last salute, because we probably won't see it again standing.
Just past the Ambassador Bridge, our EMT had set up a little surprise for the guys from the Detroit Fire Department. While all this was happening, something important wasn't.
Any other friends we gotta stop and see along the way?
It's all business from here on out, right, boys?
We got started, and the first part is the euphoric part of the paddle, where it's fun. It's, you know, you're in a beautiful place, and it's a lot of enjoyment and taking the scenery in. And that was the first part of our event, coming down the river. The problem with that part of the event, from the perspective of what they end up having to do down the line, is getting a rhythm and getting set up for what's going to be an endurance activity.
Not just the guys' rhythm, the safety boat's rhythm too. On this trip we had two massive safety boats, the 46-foot Censorship and the 52-foot Elizabeth. These boats aren't meant to travel at 2 to 3 miles per hour for 24 hours at a time. This will cause an issue for one of the guys later in the paddle. It was about 3 to 4 hours into the trip and they passed River Rouge's Zug Island. That's just south of Detroit. This island helped build America. It was right here where Henry Ford produced the first assembly line cars. The Edmund Fitzgerald was built about a half a mile away from here. But it was also here where a major source of pollution spilled right into Lake Erie.
The most polluted land in the country.
Right here?
This chunk.
But they said, like, out of River Rouge, when the Ford plant was going, it would be black from oil, and there's a pickle plant too that would change the river actually orange. Just all that coming out into our watersheds, and it was really harmful for the lake. I think historically Lake Erie was a dumping ground, but we were pleasantly surprised on how blue, clear, not clear, but clean the water was actually, what it actually was. I mean, we got to see how in the last 20, 30 years, how people that care are making an impact. And it still needs help, but we're going in the right direction.
And that's part of the point. Let's be honest. The world is always going to need steel, and the world is always going to need industry to make that steel and other products. But every single one of us can always be better when it comes to the environment.
The positive about seeing on the shoreline all these smokestacks and the industry doing its thing, but you look in the water and, you know, the water was surprisingly clean. It looked good, so I think it, you know, shows that you can still operate this stuff and, you know, find a way to do it right.
We're probably always going to need steel, right? We're going to need this stuff, but how can we work together and make sure just stuff that's toxic doesn't go in the water? That's what we want to do.
We're not going the fastest, but it's so hot.
At that point, it was getting very hot. Our EMT takes meticulous notes on Quinn, Jeff, and Joe's body language.
And I'm just kind of watching what they're drinking, making sure they're drinking right from the beginning of the break to the end of the break. Right now, it looks like heat is going to be our major concern. This is the hottest we've ever had on a paddle.
For us in these events early on, trying to get some stability in what's going on in our speed, our pace, and certainly our direction is going to have a lot of play on how things work later on in the trip. With the currents, the river, we weren't as stable as we needed to be, and that caused a little bit of chaos right out of the gate.
Here comes Joe!
Especially for Joe. He started falling behind.
I ended up paddling in the middle of the river. I was paddling pretty hard, about as hard as I was willing to paddle. And everybody else was just like slowly, you know, getting away. And it looked like they were just not paddling at all, like just like barely paddling.
Quinn and I were pretty much following the boats in the shipping channel. And we were moving along. It felt like we were barely even paddling. And Joe was like way back there, and Bright comes up and he yells at us, "Guys, I can't paddle any faster, slow down, slow down." And we're like, we're not even barely touching the water with our paddle. So we go another hour. He's way back there. He comes up and he is just furious at us.
Yeah, I'm just not paddling any faster than that. You guys can go whatever pace you want.
No, we're cool.
Fast as I'm paddling.
No, you're good. We're trying to get the feel for what's going on with it because it's a little bit different.
If I'm by myself the whole time, I don't really get...
I don't think that's gonna happen.
It just sucks paddling as hard as you can. Like, everybody's pulling away, and it's like hour 2 or 3. So that's basically how I was like, this is gonna be a long paddle.
We're gonna let him cool off a little bit.
We're feeling the heat. Yeah.
We're gonna have a chat with him.
We need to try and stable it out on our end so that we can provide you with a stable target. That's certainly part of it.
I can't go any slower. It's painful.
Part of the problem is Joe wasn't in the shipping lane. That's where the current is. The other problem was Joe hates the beginning of these paddles. He's kind of like an old diesel engine, where it takes a while to warm up, and the longer it runs, the stronger it is. He wasn't warmed up yet.
Yeah, that's the worst part of the paddle. The beginning. I think it takes really honestly takes about 10, 15 miles before I'm loosened up.
Once he got in the current and got his head right, he was like, all right. And then all of a sudden he's in front of us, booking it, he's way in front of us. And he told me today, he regrets what he said and did, but that's all part of it.
Joe's head was back in the game, and just in time.
So right before the Livingston Channel, we could see this huge freighter coming. That's kind of a tight channel, right? So we're gonna have to go past it.
The Thunder Bay was upbound and not stopping or slowing down for anything.
The freighter comes by and it kicks off this monster wave. And Quinn and I looked over, and Julie and Chris were taking the Elizabeth, and they were literally 15, 20 feet from the freighter. And Quinn's like, what in the heck are they doing?
Yeah, they blasted up there to try and block some of that wave, which was cool. That was an aggressive move. I wanted a little bit of action, so I went straight for those waves, just ripped through them. That was fun.
All right.
Lake Erie was close, but the Detroit River had one more experience for the guys, the Livingstone Channel.
It was pretty obvious that all the water going in there was pumping. I mean, there's rapids right at that little lighthouse.
It's like sucking me back into that.
The Livingstone Channel is an engineering marvel. It rivaled the construction of the Panama Canal, being one of the largest dredging operations of its time. The channel opened October 12, 1912, and was an awesome distraction for the guys before hitting open water.
Felt like I was on the Disney Jungle Cruise almost, because you have what looks like mangroves on either side of you.
You're surrounded by banks on both sides that have a lot of vegetation. And it reminded me of being in Florida, when you're going through those canals and you can't really see much beyond those two sides. And you're going with a pretty nice current, but at times in there, you almost get a wind tunnel.
The river portion of the paddle was over. 40 miles of open water to go. Into Lake Erie, Quinn, Jeff, and Joe go. And quickly, the word of the day was...
Headwind.
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 Unplanned wind.
Headwinds.
Headwinds.
Headwind.
That's the motto of this paddle, seems like. Headwind, headwind, headwind.
Mother Nature greeted the guys with one big, massive headwind.
And then we keep paddling, get further offshore, still got a headwind. Keep paddling, further offshore, still got a headwind. And then it's basically I'm going to fast forward, it's nighttime. And we still got a headwind, and all night we still got a headwind, and then in the morning, still got a headwind. So that's the headwind story.
It's like the old Mother Nature sense of humor joke, except for it's really not that funny. The bait and switch trick, Corey. So we tell you it's gonna be this way. We convince Tom O'Hare that it's gonna be this way. We convince Ryan Matuzak it's gonna be this way. Hell, we even convinced the paddleboarders it's gonna be that way. But Mother Nature says, surprise!
For perspective, on Superior, we were doing about 4 miles an hour. And paddling on Erie, about the same amount of energy, maybe even paddling a little bit harder, we were going 1.2 miles an hour. So if you do the math, it's a lot slower. And it just sucks the life out of you.
That's the best way to say it. even if it's light, it's still pushing you the wrong way, and you're still fighting, even those little waves. I mean, you go out for an hour or two, no big deal. But when you're going on a 23-hour paddle, and you have light headwinds, and strong headwinds, and then light headwinds, and then strong and never letting up, it takes its toll, especially on your shoulders and your joints and your back. And by the end, mine were burning.
Though the headwind was challenging, it may have been a blessing in disguise.
Nice thing about this breeze is you don't get midges and all those little smaller bugs that are very annoying on a calm day.
It was keeping the bugs off them. And another major issue they prepared for was mayflies. The hatch hadn't happened yet and it was late. Check out this graphic from a television station in Toledo. This was only 5 days after the paddle, and those aren't clouds. That's the mayfly hatch. They would have had to paddle straight through that.
Kind of a creepy little bugger. They're not everybody's favorite, but they fight.
Everything was going great. A little slow, but no problems. But Joe was hiding something. Something no one knew about until this interview.
The day before, I was just like laying on the ground, just relaxing. And then I sat up and it felt like everything was spinning like crazy. And, you know, vertigo. Never had it before, but it was like substantial. And it kept getting worse and worse. And about 11:30 p.m., I was getting ready to call everybody to just say I wasn't doing it. Legit.
These guys are watched intensely by the safety crew. Joe was hiding his vertigo pretty good. You couldn't even tell he was having a problem.
Did you let Mike know?
No. I didn't want it to be like a issue.
Well, it's really concerning that, you know, you find out after the fact that, hey, your guy was dealing with this, and you know, you listen to any professional sport and you find out after the game and after the race and, you know, after the event that someone had to work through adversity. And for him to approach this and to, you know, go into it and hold that back and just go for it, that's totally Joe. And I was not even the least bit surprised, you know, bummed, but not surprised.
Sunset is happening soon. We got about an hour. We're chilling.
It was shaping up to be a beautiful night on Lake Erie. Right before sunset, Jeff had the chance to do something special for somebody he loves. His aunt passed away just prior to the paddle.
This is for Aunt Mary Ellen. This is the rose I just dropped in the water to remember her life. We're about halfway between Michigan and Ohio. And here's her beloved Spartans. And here is her coffee cake recipe that is so good that my mom made a piece and sent with me.
The sunset was stunning.
That's what it's all about, protecting this place right here.
The sunset was pretty cool. Yeah, that was special. Yeah, that was probably a top 5 sunset I've ever seen.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that was probably the best sunset I've seen thus far on any paddle. Big old red orb, laying the sky up, and you know, like we called it in, a freighter going right behind us. It seemed like it was set up.
There's so many parts of this paddle that were unbelievable. You know, the skyline, the industry, the currents, the headwind, but then that sunset. Freighter comes in, like literally perfect timing behind us. We were hoping as the sun went down that it would calm, but obviously it didn't.
What an epic paddle today. First star! First star! Beat to
The night came fast and the headwind was like an irritating rash. It never stopped, and that became real apparent during one break.
And we were going the slowest we've ever gone because of these headwinds. Usually we average 3 mile an hour, 4 mile an hour sometimes. We were going like 1.8, 1.3, which is like trickling along.
It's taking forever.
I remember like the second you stop paddling, your board literally turns around instantly and you're going the other way and you don't realize it because you don't have a lot of markers around you, but you're flying in the opposite direction. So you have to make up that ground after a break. And you know, our safety captain Ryan, he was like, you guys realize that you're paddling 1.3 miles an hour and that wind is pushing you back 1.8 miles an hour the other way. So we didn't lose all the ground that we made up, but it was pushing us back faster than we could paddle into it.
So I don't know if you can hear me, but we're on a break. It turns out we were going backwards faster than we were able to paddle forward. So no more breaks for us.
This is the part of the night where you can tell how hard these paddles really are, and you could really see it on Quinn's face.
Are you hitting a little wall, are you?
Everything hurts right now.
Yeah. Just try to do some isometric, you know?
Yeah.
Relaxation and constriction.
This is the worst time for me always.
I know.
When you paddle, usually you glide for a bit and you paddle and you glide, but those waves you had to keep building that momentum every paddle stroke, which is tough on the shoulders. And my traps and joints, and they were just on fire.
No, Lake Erie didn't do Quinn any favors at all. You know, in terms of what was going on out there, of course, they're all tired and they're beat down, but you know, Joe is, the further you get into the game, the tougher he gets. That guy is fun to watch because once you get him settled into his groove, he really lightens up and it just becomes less and less effort for him.
We got a long way to go, probably 20 miles still.
Quinn's been that way as well, although this time around, you know, the way that the headwinds were and the whole setup caught him off guard, and he was working and working hard to try and get his mental focus there so that he could turn that mental focus into physical success. And
it's not the easiest paddling right now.
Jeff, as always, he's pretty quiet, and I like to watch Jeff succeed at these things because he just smiles, grins, and bears it. You don't always tell when Jeff's feeling bad. You know, he masks it quite well. It's fun to watch these guys work because each one of them's got their own personality, and different parts of the trip affect each one of them differently. You know, they're still some of the toughest guys I know, and you know, this was not over with. There's a lot of paddling left to go from the point where we're drifting backwards, and this is time for us to come up with a new strategy because they're getting tired.
Part of that strategy was loosening up the rules a bit. Usually at night there's a strict protocol so the safety team can always see the guys' faces. However, we had this big, beautiful, almost full moon that lit up the whole lake.
A lot of our events have been held in the darkest of nights. No moon, the beautiful skies, stars, just really, really fantastic sight. We had a moon this night, and it was bright. I could see him very clearly. Had no trouble and really wasn't worried about him. And Mike questioned me on it once, and I just told him, I said, you know, I'll stay close and we'll holler and keep him tight, but I'm not gonna push the issue right now because I can see him.
Remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life when Jimmy Stewart said, "Do you want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down." Quinn, Jeff, and Joe basically did just that and made some incredible memories.
And that was amazing. It was so cool. First time we'd ever have a moon that big on a paddle, and it let us relax a little bit at night.
Relax and have some fun.
Perfect.
Quinn was talking about like getting out there, like paddling away from everything. It's like, dude, get a silhouette shot, get a silhouette shot. And he's out there, and he's like, this is once in a lifetime. And then as soon as he said that, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, paddled up, got up right next to him. It was cool.
We were paddling right at the moon, so you could see all the waves. That was neat, and also I think we were, more so Quinn was trying to get some photo shoots out in the moonlight, so that kind of broke up the time because we could make fun of him a little bit.
I always give Quinn crap, but you know, he's extremely photogenic, so I mean, if I was that photogenic, I would probably, you know, do the same thing. I'd have my shirt off too, you know.
All kidding aside, these nights are when the guys can really reflect on what they're doing.
I feel like the human spirit needs this adventure for his soul, you know? And not only just the purpose, but being uncomfortable.
I kept having to stop myself and say, live in the moment. I know you're trying to get to the end, and it's gonna be great when you get there, but I was like, look at where you are. You're in the middle of this lake. Nobody gets to do this. You're with your buddies, you're with a great team, the best EMT, the best captain, the best support group, all together for one purpose. Like, you've got the organization that you're standing up for right there. It made it that much more rich for me.
Okay, somehow we made it through the night. Morning has come and we can see land, so all good stuff. I think a couple of us are hitting some walls.
Like the sunset, the sunrise was equally as stunning.
Morning.
Quinn was hurting, but it was a good pain.
My legs were killing me, and like it was just like, whoa, you're exhausted, you know, you've been paddling for 20 hours at that point. Part of that was pain, part of that was exhaustion, and part of that was just trying to live in that moment. So like you'll see me there and I'm just like bent over and like just trying to take that in, because that is one of the best feelings that you could have in the world.
Joe, the old diesel engine, was getting stronger and was able to repay a debt from earlier in the paddle.
Listen to the voices.
You know, that's the other good point about having all of us doing this together is like early on, Quinn can bring me back into, you know, whatever, get my attitude good or whatever.
Of the keepers of the water.
And like later on when I feel good and he's starting to slow down, I can do whatever I can to, you know, get his spirits up a little bit. You know, so it's nice being able to lean on each other.
And Jeff is just Jeff, just grinding along.
Listen to the voices, voices of the keepers of the water. We must change the music of its dance. Hungry for progress, blind to what it's cost us. Our future can't be left to chance.
Every one of these paddles is different. Every lake a new challenge and different adversity. The only similarity between when they crossed Lake Superior and Lake Erie was in the end they were live on Michigan this morning. Beat, broken, and exhausted, they were given one last challenge.
Oh, by the way, the landing points changed, so you have to go a little bit longer. And if you make it there by 8:45, you'll be on the, you know, the live on TV, you know, and that's our goal, is to get as much attention and awareness, and, you know, so that challenge was set for us, and we're like, oh my God, all right, let's do it.
One of the things that made me come along for the second ride was all the positive energy, your humble attitude, and just the general, you know, love that you brought to the project. And when you go ashore, do what you do best. And and that is show those things off to those people.
And so we picked up, we had to go between 2.5 and 3.2. Luckily the weather calmed and we had a sheet of glass, and we were able to dig a little deeper at the end and get back up to our normal speed and finish just in time for our followers that have been so awesome in here in northern Michigan and 9 and 10 especially.
Ultimately, it really came down to Quinn having to dig deep. He was in the roughest shape I'd seen him on any of these events. The last part of that trip, he dug in deep. We turned up the speed because we wanted to be there in time so that the families that were back home could see it on 9 and 10 News. To share this with our community and the families that are back home watching was a pretty big motivating factor. And we made some really good time on that last stretch, and they were hurting. They were hurting, but they made great time. They were up in the fours. Yep, guys, you were in the fours.
Like that first time we came around that corner, we could see people. No matter what, I always tell myself, I'm not gonna cry, I'm not gonna cry. And all of a sudden you're just like, little baby, you know, just starts coming out, and you look at each other and you're like, and Joe, he's like, man, I love you guys. You know, he said that as the sun was coming up. And Jeff right away was like, love you too. And I just like, get under skin, I waited a little bit, and I was like, he goes, you know, Quinn, that hurt my feelings. I was like, I love you too, man, you know?
Quinn, Jeff, and Joe don't do this for fame. They don't do it for glory. These crossings hurt. They do it to drive a point home, that it's worth the pain to raise awareness to keep what they're gliding across clean, fresh water. That's worth standing up for.
When they got to shore, we were there and we could see the looks on their faces. I mean, that headwind for the whole trip had taken its toll, and this was done, and it was a success, but it was not easy.
Quinn, Jeff, and Joe paddled 73 miles in 23 and a half hours and ended up raising $17,000 for CIGLR.
That was tough.
Oh my God.
Thanks, Joe. Love you.
Hi, brother.
Hey, on my brother.
Hey, glad you made it.
Another one.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, sweaty.
Oh, gross. Brothers don't shake hands.
Let's raise our voices before it's gone, while kings and corporations look on. Sing for the river, sing for the water, for the spirit of the people of the land. Sing for a bridge where we can come together from Mother Earth. We all must stand and sing for the water. Sing for the water. The system is broken, but with our eyes wide open, we can make a change from within.